network at Async. And today I'm going to talk about Bitcoin and Phoenix, which is a mobile app which we wrote in a Kotlin multi-platform, and which is a wallet for Bitcoin and Lightning. So first thing first, I'm going to talk about a bit about Bitcoin, what it is. So it's a network, it's a payment network, and it's peer-to-peer. So you have nodes distributed all over the world, and they are connected to one another. It's decentralized. There is no central node. There is no central authority. There is no administrators. So the network is neutral. If you make a payment, no one can censor it. It will go through, even if you don't want to relay it. Someone else will probably relay the payment. And it is trustless, which means that you don't have to trust anyone on the network to make your payments. You are on your own. You are independent. How is it possible? Each node on the network has a copy of a ledger, a database, which is called the blockchain. I guess most people have heard about it now. When you make a payment, when you make a transaction, you actually change the blockchain. You make a kind of a new block, pretty simplified, but you get the idea. And you broadcast this payment. You broadcast this change, and you broadcast it to your peers. So if you are this guy, you broadcast the change to your 3 peers, and those peers, they validate this change because there is a consensus. Everyone is using the same software. So you validate the change. And then your peers broadcast this change to their own peers. And that's it. The change has been pushed to every node on the network. And everybody verifies everything. There is no trust. Bitcoin is adversarial. It's adversarial minded. So it doesn't think that your peer is nice. It doesn't assume anything about your peers. So it's pretty great. It's working since 10 years, 11 years now. And there is a big market cap, 1 trillion USD. It's a lot. And there is 6 billion USD, which is transferred every day on the chain. But it's kind of magic, internet money. It's a meme, but it's not perfect. There is a limitation with the flow of transaction. You can only make 5 to 10 transactions per second. So if you have 8 billion people, it doesn't work. And the ambition of Bitcoin is to make the network available for everyone and used by everyone in the world. So it needs to scale. And how can you scale without losing your properties? So decentralization, trustlessness, and so on. So the idea is to scale with layers. And the rough idea is here. You have the layer 1, which is the blockchain, the Bitcoin blockchain, and you have a layer over it. And this layer is called Lightning. And basically, every changes that happens on the layer 2 impacts the layer 1, but it's aggregated. And if you have a problem on the layer 2, the layer 1 is not affected. So that's how you can scale without losing your properties. So a bit more details about Lightning. It's also a network. It's also peer-to-peer. But it doesn't work the same way as Bitcoin. The payments are routed, so it's something that people are more familiar with. It's not broadcast. You route your payment to your peers. For example, if you have Alice here wants to send a love letter to Bob, for example. It's a payment, but anyway, she first needs to compute the route to Bob, and the route. Obviously, it goes through Dave, Carol, and then Bob. So she sends first the payment to Dave, which receive it. It's encrypted in Onion, like Tor. So Dave doesn't know what it is. Doesn't know it is a heart. Just see a smiley. Dave then forwards the payment, encrypted payment, to Carol. And Carol doesn't know it, but the next hop is the last hop in the route, and it's Bob. And then Bob receives the message. And all the nodes around this one or this one, they are not affected. So they don't need to know that a payment happened. Also, the layer 1 is not affected. So that's the way we scale with Bitcoin and Lightning. Oh, maybe the question afterwards? Or, okay, it's better. So small screenshot of all the nodes in the network today, all over the world. So you see a lot of things happening in Europe, in the US, and also in Japan and Australia and everywhere. So it's Lightning. It was first idea was published in 2015, and it's live since 2018, and its working rate, it has grown a lot, and the specifications are a work in progress. It's open source. Everyone can contribute, and there are implementations to this protocol. And here as I think we are working on an implementation which is called Eclair, which is Lightning in French. And we chose to use the JVM with Scala and Akka because we wanted to make software for servers to route a lot of payments. So Scala and Akka are really great for this. Akka is an actor library, and it's really designed to handle a lot of communication. It's a high throughput software, Eclair. So it's working pretty great. We are very happy with what we have. And one thing we noticed is that we could run this software on Android, obviously, because it's the JVM. So we did that, and we made a wallet, which is a Lightning wallet, using our server software to run on Lightning. And it's an edge node, which is you mostly send and receive. So it's not really well designed for. It was not designed for an edge node, a node that's receive and send mostly. And another issue that we had is doesn't run on iOS, and a lot of people, especially in the US, are using an iPhone. So we wanted to use something else. We tried GraalVM, which it was not truly satisfying when we tested it. I think 2020, because the executable was pretty large, and it was hard to debug. So we thought about coding Eclair in another language, Rust or Swift. It would have been nice in Swift, so that we have a native Lightning engine on iOS. But the best solution was, in fact, Kotlin multi-platform, obviously, because Scala is very close in syntax with Kotlin. So it was very easy for us to port our tests and to port a lot of classes. Not everything, of course, but we could do a lot. It simplified the work. So what do we need when we make Lightning wallets? You can think about it as a chat application. Like you send encrypted messages. So you have the same, more or less the same requirements. The first thing is that the wallet controls the user private keys, and it does a lot of cryptography. So we needed to be able to port a lot of cryptographic operations and to make them happen on the device in a performance. I mean, it had to be fast because when you make a payment over Lightning, you actually sign a lot of stuff. So you need to be fast. We also needed to implement the Bitcoin protocol, Lightning protocol, and we had a lot of networking. Also, Lightning is stateful, so you need to maintain a consistent state. It's very important. If you have an inconsistent state, then your payment experience will be very bad, and in fact, your wallet will close. It's pretty, I'm simplifying it, but it's not good. So we need to be very careful about that. And a lot of stuff, classic stuff like persisting data, we want to be able to persist those Lightning data. So what can we do? We used several libraries. For example, for persistence, we use SQLDelight. So stuff exists on a KMP, and so we were able to use it. But some things we had to develop ourselves. You can see here a library which is called SecP 256K1. It's a pretty long name. So it's a very important library which is written by Bitcoin Core, written in C, and we wanted to use it because it's very well optimized. So we made a library which is called SecP 256K1 KMP, which is a wrapper for this library. And when we are on iOS, we are using CInterrupt to bridge to SecP. And when we are on the Android, we are simply using the GNI interface. That's the first step. Then the second step, is to implement the Bitcoin protocol. So we made a library which is called Bitcoin KMP, and what this library does is it takes care of everything related to Bitcoin, like creating a wallet, or writing a transaction, or writing a script. For example, with SHA-256, which is a method which is used throughout Bitcoin Core, we wanted to use on iOS. We wanted to use the native library, the native operation, so Command Crypto. And on Android, we are using the JVM, so through Message Digest. So it was really nice to be able to do that, to choose what implementation for SHA-256 we could use. Second, the next step was to actually implement Lightning, so the Lightning engine in Kotlin multi-platform as well. And what this library does is maintaining the state of the channels. So there is a state machine, very complex one, because as I mentioned, your channels are have a state, and they must not you must not lose consistency of the state. It does a lot of networking. It does routing. It does a lot of algorithmy and cryptography. One example is Chachapoly 1305. On Android, we used, it doesn't exist in the Kotlin standard library. So we had to write it on Android. So we made our own implementation. And on iOS, we noticed that CryptoKit has its implemented Chachapoly. So we were able to use that through the expect and actual stuff that you know about Kotlin multi-platform. And the last step, so we made only the libraries, the bricks for our project. The last step is to actually have the project. And for this, it's a Kotlin multi-platform mobile project with a shared module, which will contain controllers, for example, database implementation, all the HTTP requests that are common between iOS and Android. So a lot of stuff is shared. A lot of logic is shared between the two applications. But the best thing that we could do is that the actual UI stuff is native stuff. We are using Swift UI on iOS, and we are using the Android SDK on Android. We are not using an hybrid application. We are really coding in the native UI, and that's what we wanted to have. It's very different from a lot of applications where you want to, where people are actually sharing the UI code. Here we are sharing the business code, and the UI code is specific to each platform, and I think it's better. Right? So everything is open source. So you can check it out on GitHub. Some example for this. So here we are creating a Bitcoin wallet. So what is a Bitcoin wallet? It's actually a private key and a public key, which gives you control to, which lets you sign transactions. So it gives you access to your funds. So if you have the key, you have the funds. More or less, you can abstract the key with the money. So the first thing is to create some entropy. And for this, we are using the Kotlin standard secure random API. But you could use anything you want, as long as it's really random. And then there is this mnemonic API we have here. It's something that comes from Bitcoin KMP, and it's an implementation of the Bitcoin protocol, which translates this entropy into something that makes sense for human. So this sentence, few words, this is a part of your key. If you have this key, this word, then you have access to the funds. And then from this, we have a seed, and we create a master key, which is the private key and public key, which is what we will use throughout the app. And all this is shared between iOS and Android. You don't have to write this 2 times, only once. Another example is how we dealt with the peer and channel design. So you have Phoenix here, and it has many channels to a peer. It doesn't have only one channel. A channel is kind of a connection, if you want. And each channel is a state machine. So you have several state machines connected to a peer. And what is a state machine? So it's you have a state, you receive an event, and you react to that event, and you change the state to a new one, and you have some action that you must apply. So we have, for a channel, we have several states. For example, init, when the channel starts, or when you are waiting for funds, you are waiting for funds to arrive, and then once the event that the funds have confirmed, then you can move to the normal state or the active state, stuff like that. So a peer is a coroutine, and you maintain a connection to your peer. You have a channel. So sorry, it's the same word, but this is actually a channel, Kotlin channel, when you can receive messages. You have a map, which is a state flow, a map of channels. Again, the naming is not very clear, but you get the idea. And when we create the peer, then we instantiate a new state, and we process the restore event, which we could saw the last slide. You get the event, and then you process it, and you get a new action. And as you can see, the process is very simple. According to the event you receive, then you will make a new action. And we are using the when instruction. When we were on Scala, we were able to have a very nice pattern matching. On Kotlin, it's not as good, but it's still doing the job. It's better than doing it in Java. And then once you process the action, you update the channel flow to a new state. Another issue we had was how to use flows from Swift, Kotlin flows from Swift. And we managed to translate the flow and state flow into the Swift publisher types. So what it means is that we are able to consume flows, Kotlin flows directly from Swift. It's really seamless. So that's pretty great. We needed to make a few code to write some code, but it's working very well. And last thing about the Phoenix shared module, how we wrote it, and that was by the way an idea from Salomon and Romain from Kotlin coders. The idea is to use the MVI pattern, which is you have a controller and a view, and the controller is pushing a model using a state flow. You are pushing a model, the view updates, and if you have some buttons in your view, when you click on a button, for example, you push an intent to the controller. And it works very well with Kotlin multi-platform because you can have your view written in Swift or Kotlin, I mean, in the Android SDK. And the controller is written in Kotlin multi-platform. So it is shared between the Android and iOS application. You can define a screen in Phoenix in the shared module. For example, you can see on the right the various states of your model, and those states will be usable from the iOS app and the Android app. So how much time did it take us to move to KMP? So moving the engine, it took us around 6 months, but it's a work in progress, of course, because it's always changing. But it was very fast. We thought we would have needed at least 1 year, but it was way faster than we thought. And for the iOS app, the hard part is to get used to Gradle, especially for an iOS developer. They are not used to that. They are not used to Android Studio, so it's pretty complex. And so if you want to move to KMP, you need to take care of your iOS developers. You need to help them and help them with Gradle, obviously. And a good thing is that we are able to use some of the KMP stuff in our main Scala project. And yeah, a small screenshots here from a payment we made 2 weeks ago in Salvador. We were buying a tacos on the left, and here we are paying with our application, our mobile wallet on iOS. And yeah, it worked. Thanks. And if you are interested, we are hiring, so you can send an email. Thank you.